So, hello, Chris. Now, is it Chris Chafin or Chaffin or how do you
Yeah,
pronounce
it's actually Chafin.
Chafin? Cool.
Yeah,
Literally every artist interview I do, I'm like, how do you pronounce this? Because you see it
yeah,
written, but you don't necessarily know how to pronounce it. So I thought I'd
yeah. From
start
my,
with that.
my understanding, our family comes from over in Europe somewhere, and they actually pronounced it Chapin, but my grandfather changed it to Chafin. So,
Ah, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
yeah,
Right. So before we had this interview, you kind of given me a bit of homework here.
yeah. I give you a little too much information, actually.
You're in the process of writing a book or a short sort of book about yourself.
Well, just something for
Am I
the kids,
correct?
right? So looking back on why I did this record, it was just mainly writing a song for somebody, right? It was for somebody who's struggling with addiction, and I wanted to do something for them, and
Yeah.
because they were a singer and guitarists, and they were doing some recordings. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write this song, and maybe it'll be inspirational for her. And as it turns out, she had some other stuff going on. She didn't want to record it. So at that point, then I'm like, okay, well, I'll put some music to it. And then after I did that, I remembered I couldn't sing. So then I had to find somebody, to sing it. And um, so long story short, that led into another song after I did two songs. And I realized, okay, I just want to do enough for an album.
Yeah.
I'd never done anything like this in my life. So I'm like, I'm going to do enough to put on some wax and frame it, put it on my wall, and just keep it as a keepsake forever. And in the process, I decided, okay, I'm going to just write a little book to go for the kids. I got a couple kids, a couple adult
Yeah.
kids. They can hand down to the grandkids and say, look, your grandfather wasn't too square after all. He did this at one point.
That's so cool. My grandfather actually did the same, and he's just got this little electronic book written, and we can just look at it and read it every now and then. I
That's
can I
cool.
could say to my son, that this is your great granddad here. This is a bit
Right.
about his life, and explained much more in detail. So yeah,
Sure.
so I've read a bit of background about you from the book as well as the notes that you gave me to complement the album. Would you be able to give a bit of background about yourself in a in a
Yeah, sure.
in a brief kind of way? Because
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. So briefly, I've obviously been around for a bit. Grew up in the 70s and 80s. So the music pretty much is probably kind of reflective of that. When I sat down to write, I'm going to write what I know, and instead of trying to write stuff that's current to today, because there was no expectation of having anything played on the radio. It's just something to do.
yeah,
So growing up in the 70s and 80s, I was exposed to all kinds of different kinds of music. In my family, my parents listened to adult contemporary and country. My brother was more the, I guess, what is it, AOR or whatever, just your deep classic cut stuff, or what became classic rock
yeah,
today.
yeah,
And my sisters were both in the top 40. So, and of course, all that kind of starts from R&B. So you have all that built into it as well. So musically, it's, in my opinion, I got the best of all worlds. I got 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and what's good about today's music as well. And
yeah.
that's just kind of all been sort of an influence to me.
Fantastic. I mean, they're all great eras. I would have loved to have grown up in like the late 60s, early 70s, around the time
Yeah.
Beatles were happening. I bet that was an amazing time.
Man, it was
Uh,
crazy. It really was. I mean, again, I was a little later than that, so most of what I remember is kind of started in the mid '70s, early to mid
yeah,
'70s, and then kind of evolved from there. And
yeah,
and just being able to turn on the radio and hearing new music coming on,
yeah,
that I really enjoyed. And I'm sure that that's still happening today. It's just being an old, coming from a different generation, and knowing that the music from back then really was the soundtrack of my life. That's the kind of stuff that I got accustomed to. So
yeah.
when I hear new stuff today, a lot of it doesn't appeal to me today,
Mm.
as opposed to the stuff from back then.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of the stuff today is just an amalgamation of things that have happened in the past, but then I don't know, kind of really futuristic almost sounding in a way at times. But yeah, I mean the 70s and the 80s, even the 90s, they're like game changing eras genre
Absolutely.
wise. It's amazing. So what first got you into music then? Was it parents or was it
Uh,
family or
as far as just listening, probably just it was accidental, I guess. I was just in the backyard playing, and I had a little portable AM radio on, and some song came on, and like, oh man, I really like that. So I'm holding it up to my ear, listening to it, and hearing some
yeah,
other stuff come on. I just got hooked from there. So as far as listening to music, that was it. As far as playing guitar, that sort of started when I was probably about 12 or 13. And I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know what really caused me to do that and pick it up and start playing. I know that
yeah,
my brother had a guitar in the house, just a little acoustic. And one day I was over at my grandparents. They lived up in Chicago, which was a good ways away from where we live, but we'd visit all the time.
Yeah.
And I was messing around in their basement, and she had a little electric guitar down in there. And I really took to it. As far as I'm like, oh, Granny, I'd really like to have that. So she gives it to me, and started taking lessons from there. And I did that for a few years, and just kind of quit and gave it up for a long time until I had my daughter. My wife and I had her daughter back in right around turn of the century,
Yeah.
and she wanted to start playing music or learn how to play guitar when she's about 7. So it's like, hey, cool, I get to buy me that Gibson Les Paul I always wanted. I couldn't afford it back in the old days.
Great
So,
excuse, yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Oh,
She got
brilliant.
the cheap Walmart special, and I got the Gibson. Yeah.
So you gave up playing guitar for a while. You got a career in IT.
Right.
I did a bit of homework,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah. You did read some of it. Yeah, cool.
yeah, and then you came back to it. So it was your daughter wanting to take it up was the reason why you did as well.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, also around that time, about a year or two afterwards, I started working for Gibson Guitar and in IT. We did the website for them,
Yeah,
and we're just constantly surrounded by guitars because that was what we did. The Gibson website then was more of a marketing tool for selling the product line,
yeah,
and we would always get the newest stuff in just all the time. We're having to take pictures, put all the specs on the website, and I kind of
nice.
got hooked again. And having all those around, and they're just laying around all the time, so you just pick them up and start playing them, and
So
it was really,
were you
really cool.
self-taught? Sorry, were you self-taught or were you did you have lessons at all?
I had lessons when I was about 12 or 13 when I first
Yeah,
started playing, and I did that for about 6 months, maybe a year.
yeah,
But it was just you know I didn't learn theory, I didn't learn scales, I didn't do the things I should have done. I just wanted to learn those familiar riffs.
proper rock and roll style. Yeah,
Exactly. It's like,
yeah.
hey, Sweet Home Alabama, how do you play that? And he'd teach me how to play it. And he said, oh, don't forget to practice your scales. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I'm doing that now when I'm doing my scales.
Every teenage child ever with a guitar, the same thing. Like,
Oh yeah,
for me, it was like, can I learn White Stripes?
yeah.
Things like
Exactly.
that.
Even when I
Um,
picked it back up and in the late 2000s and started playing again, kind of the
yeah,
same thing. I just wanted to learn some songs I didn't learn back in the day, so I was
yeah.
just kind of learning those familiar riffs again, getting used to it. And never, I tried to learn theory one time. I got a book on it, read 3 pages, and it's sitting in my drawer behind me now. Hadn't opened it since. Don't understand
Brilliant.
it.
What was it like picking it back up again? Was it like riding a bike, or was it very weird and alien to do that
And it
after so
actually
long?
was like riding a bike. Surprisingly, it had been a long time, and a lot of the
Yeah,
songs I had learned before. I mean, it just comes right back to you.
yeah,
It'd been 20, 25 years since I played, but you play them so many times, repetition, you do it so many times, and it's hard to forget it later on. It's kind of
yeah,
like the words of a song. I could sit there and sing the words of these songs I learned 40 years ago, but you try to teach me a new song that I heard on the radio 2 days ago, and I'll never learn it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's that repetition of hearing it over and over and over.
It
Same
is.
thing with
And then if it's something you enjoy, especially during your like formative years, your teenage years, it
absolutely,
just gets so embedded so easily as
absolutely.
a child, and it's so much harder as an adult to
Oh yeah, I
remember new
mean,
things.
well, yeah, and the older you get, the more responsibility you get, the more your mind is in 1,000 other places, and it's
Yeah,
a lot harder to focus. It really
yeah,
is.
yeah. And there's so much content out there as well. It's hard to like learn everything, like the amount of
Oh yeah,
music I listen to and everything.
yeah.
Couldn't learn it all.
You mentioned the '90s. I kind of quit listening to music or newer music, in the late '80s, early '90s, because it kind
Yeah,
of I love the classic rock, that arena rock, Boston, Sticks, that stuff people were hating. And
yeah,
but then a buddy of mine where I worked, he told me about his new alternative stuff's out. It's pretty cool. So stuff like Collective Soul and Live. I don't know if you're familiar with these bands, but
mm,
it's post grunge or right around when grunge was so popular, but it
yeah,
came out maybe a year or two after,
yeah.
and really really enjoyed that through about the end of the '90s, and then it kind of all started sounding the same after that. And but I still love listening to that. That has kind of an influence on what I do as well. No,
Nice. Yeah. Right. Gonna go on to the album. Have you made any albums before in the past?
no,
Were they?
no,
So this is your
no.
first ever album.
Yeah,
Wow.
I've never done a song, never wrote a song, never wrote a solo, never wrote
Yeah.
a lyric in my life. I'm not what I consider a creative person.
Yeah.
It's more, I kind of see there's people who they're either very creative or they're very technical. And if you find somebody who's got both, I mean, that's a special person in my mind. But
Yeah.
I've always been more on the technical side. And it just, the idea of being creative is just foreign to me. But having to sit down and do it for a reason, writing
Yeah.
that one song for a friend of mine, it was important, and it kind of gave me a chance to get away from all the other stuff. It was actually a really good break. It took about nine
Yeah.
months to do from time I started till finished, and it was really good having that break to do something different and creative and something
Yeah.
tangible I can leave for the kids.
Nice. So were all these songs that you created for the album, or were they
Yes.
things you had in your arsenal from the past?
Oh no, there is no arsenal from from the only things in the arsenal are ACDC and stuff like that. Stuff I learned, but no, I've never written anything. I've never had a class in any of that. But
Yeah.
you listen to music enough, you get the concept. Verse, verse, chorus, verse. You kind of get the concept of that.
Yeah.
Um, Even though listening to kind of listening to some of it now, it's like, there's some things I should have done different and should have done better. But for the most part, the whole purpose really was just to do something for my kids and
Yeah.
put it on the wall and say, hey, I did this. It's sort of a Mount Everest sort of thing after a bit.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. You set yourself this kind of challenge. I want to do this, and you did it. And you mentioned
Yeah.
that you're more technical. Does that mean like working within the computer on a like audio workstation more
Right.
than anything?
Well,
Because
yeah,
that's how I love to work, and that is very that
yeah.
I see that as creative.
Yeah,
It's a different way of
I've
working.
actually I've been a computer programmer since 1985. That's kind of where I got my start, was just programming.
Right.
Um, and a lot of it is front end type stuff. A lot of it's back end stuff. Stripe riggers, mainframes. I mean, basically everything over the course of 40 years.
Yeah.
And over the last 10 years, it's been more management. As you
Yeah.
get older, it's like you got to start coaching instead of playing, because the new guys are much better than you. Like you said, younger people, man, they just absorb knowledge.
The new
And
guys programming AI and everything, aren't they?
oh God, I don't even want to think about that, to be honest with you. It's kind of scary, but that's kind of my background was just doing that, and yeah, there's some creativity involved in it, but
Mm,
it's more just technical, dealing with things instead of people. I've been a better thing person than a people person.
yeah. Yeah. So background to the album, like what was the inspiration? Was it your children? You mentioned that you were writing it for someone that did you mention on drugs? Is that right?
It was alcohol addiction, mainly,
Alcohol, right?
and,
Yeah.
and just out of respect for her, I want to keep her name anonymous. But it was somebody really, really close to me, and it's something she's been struggling with for, at the time, 7 years. She'd been really struggling with it,
Yeah.
and but she wants to beat it. It's not, addiction is not something that anybody asks for. It's just something they're thrust into.
Yeah.
And most people want to get out of it. They struggle. They do their best. And the key for everybody else around them who love them is just, you got to be there for them. You never give up, and you're always there for them.
Yeah.
And,
Even in the most like frustrating moments where you
oh
get
yeah.
so annoyed, you just got to
And,
remember.
and it's hard. But then I
Yes.
think about, it's got to be, 1,000 times harder for her.
Yeah.
So it's like, we're going to be there. And so that's kind of what led into this. I just wanted to write a song for her. Like I
Right.
said, she was singing and doing some recording with a friend and thinking, okay, well, maybe this would be inspirational for her. Maybe she'll want to sing it.
Yeah.
As it turns out, it's not really the style that she's doing. It's more 80s, 90s, or whatever you want to call it type style. So, and
Yeah.
that's cool. But that's why I just laid down some music for it, and realized quickly I needed some help, because I don't sing, I don't play drums or anything like that. That's where Fiverr came along, and thank God for Fiverr, or else I'd still be stuck on the first song.
Oh, Fiverr's great for that, isn't it?
Oh, it's
Just
awesome. It's
getting
unbelievable.
singers, drummers, bassists, everything.
I had no idea it existed. I was watching. There's a guy, I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's called Steve Terryberry. He's a metal guy. He's
Oh,
got
yeah, I love his videos.
amazing, amazing guy. But he actually had a video one time where he's talking about all the different gear he's got.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching, and every bit of recording gear I've got is everything that he was recommending, just because I had no idea. I never recorded anything. I didn't know what to get. I didn't know about interfaces, software, DAWs. I knew nothing.
Yeah.
So I went with all his recommendations, and then he started showing, he did some little skit where he's reaching out to people on Fiverr to
Yes.
sing songs. So it was more of a funny thing. But that's when I realized, I'm like, wait a minute, there's people who sing on Fiverr and you can pay them. So I got to looking around, and at first I wasn't finding the right singer. I found the drummer real quick, and this guy's amazing. He's from South Africa. He lives in London now, but just an amazing, amazing drummer.
Yeah.
And so he laid down the drum track for the first song, and I got to looking for the singer, and I kind of wanted that metal, a little bit of this metally kind of sound, 80s metal type sound,
Yeah.
like an 80s metal ballad. And finally, after digging and digging, almost gave up. I ran across the guy. His name's Lukey, and he just really he creates the harmony in the songs, or the melodies. I don't create the melodies. I write
Yeah.
all the music in the lyrics. He does the harmony or the melody. Sorry.
Yeah,
And he's got just, he's got that right voice. He's actually in a metal band in Chile, or he was a hair metal band in Chile.
yeah,
Um, but just an amazing talent. And so he's the one who sang most of the songs on the record. And then there's another guy who sings a couple of them just because I wanted a little variety on there. I didn't want it to be all the same vocal.
yeah.
But yeah, like I said, thank God for Viber. I'd be nowhere without it.
I bet it's nice because you choose these people and it can completely change how your song feels, what you imagined.
Yeah.
Was it like that where you're like, actually, this is different how I wanted it, but that's okay. I'm going to keep going with it.
One or two of them were like that. In
Yeah,
fact, the song that I did, this first one that I did, this battley one, it was more when I first wrote it, it was more bluesy sounding. The first I've written some music for it. The music for wound up using on a different song later, but it just had this bluesy feel. And again, I've never
yeah,
written a song, so I'm at this point not really realizing how to put these things together. Um, so I had some guy come over, a friend of mine come over and sing, and it just did not sound right.
yeah.
And when I reached out and I found Lukey, by the time I found him, I'd written another music piece, and I sent him both pieces, and I said, "Well, you pick which one you think is going to fit best for your voice." And he picked the one that ultimately went on the record, and really glad he did. Definitely the
Nice.
right one. It's the right mood for that particular song.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
And it left
Um,
me some music for another song, so kind of
yeah.
helped that a little bit too.
So you mentioned that you wrote all the guitars and the bass, and you said you have one regret was not getting a professional bassist. Why is that a regret?
Because I don't play bass. I'd never played bass in my life prior to this.
So when you were
And
playing it, were you playing it picked like with a plectrum?
some I just use my fingers. Some of the time I'd use a pick. It
Yeah,
just depends on what I was trying to accomplish with it. Most of it's just quarter note, half note type stuff.
yeah,
But then sometimes I try to throw in some little stuff, and a lot of it doesn't make sense. Sometimes you'll be hearing like, I don't know why you did it that way, and I didn't either. Yeah, I'm just trying to put some stuff together and make it sound right.
yeah,
So yeah, I did most of the guitar stuff. The guy Lukey that I mentioned that sang, he's also his primary thing is guitars,
yeah,
metal guitars, and he did a few solos too. Again, to give some variety, so it's not just all me.
yeah.
And he's a outstanding. I mean, he's 1,000 times more of a guitarist than I am. He's actually sponsored by Ibanez, and
Wow.
really good. I mean, really articulate. You can hear it in his style, whereas I'm just kind of sort of winging it and improvising. You can hear that he's really thinking out what he's doing. He's really
Yeah.
good.
Oh, well, that's cool. So which is your actually that's a different question. Hang on. I've got a few on my screen of like generic questions I wanted to ask you. So who would be interested in this album and who is it for?
Um, Hopefully my my family. Um, One of the things I mentioned to you, and it's kind of, yeah, I mentioned I'm sort of introverted. One of the really hard parts, and I guess it's something I had to learn when in doing this, and if I ever do another one, I'll know going into it, is affirmation. I want to think most people who are writing something, they want to feel like it's something that other people are going to like,
Mm,
not just
mm,
doing it for themselves. Even if they're just doing it for themselves, they want to think other people are going to like it. And that's how I felt. I was doing it for myself, but I wanted others to like it. And so I was reaching out to friends on Facebook, and man, it was like crickets. It's like for every 10 people I'd reach out to, I'd get one response. And it's
yeah,
not, and I'm telling them, like, hey, I need constructive criticism. So if this
yeah,
sucks, tell me so I go down a different road with this.
yeah.
And just not hearing anything back. And
It's
they're
so
getting the message.
hard, isn't it, with family and
Oh,
friends to
it's so
get
painful.
constructive criticism because they'll either be too nice or they just
Right.
won't say anything.
Right. And the ones who don't say anything were worse because I'm like, man, it's got to really suck if they're not going to even say anything. They're really trying to protect
Yeah.
my feelings here. And but then the ones who did respond were just incredibly encouraging. So
Oh, good.
they're the ones, and then the people I work with on Fiverr, they're the ones who really kind of kept me going because I mean, it was just a roller coaster of emotions going through this. Okay, okay, this really sucks. Now I'm tired. I'm done. To
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to keep going. And one of the songs on the album is actually about that. One of the last songs
Oh, that's
that
good.
we're done. So it's kind of starts off a little nice to the people who've helped, but it's not really intended for, for. I guess it's my Taylor Swift song to my friends.
Yeah. It's something you have to get used to as an artist.
Right.
People aren't going to like your music. People are going to like it as well.
Right.
And too many artists go in with the end goal of like, I want to be a famous musician, make millions. And people seem to think that with music, that's what the end goal is for everyone,
Yeah.
is just becoming famous. And that's not really. If you create
What
art for you, if
Right.
others like it, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, So as long as you with that mindset, that's okay.
Right.
And I think you've chosen a good channel for it as well, because when I review and react to your music, it's going to be with a network. It's a small network because we're a small YouTube channel at the moment, but a network that's going to be supportive and do
Sure.
it in the right way. You're not going to get "you suck" or anything like that. You'd actually get something constructive or some nice comments here or there.
I don't
Um,
even mind. I don't even mind the "you suck" ones. Just it's the ones who would just ghost you and not even say anything at all. It's like, man,
yeah,
why just leaving me in the dark here? But
yeah. I
you kind of
I prefer a "you suck" with a reason, like "you suck because," then that's all right. If it's just "you suck," nothing, that can
right,
be a lot more like, well, that how are you adding to this conversation?
exactly,
But if you're
exactly.
like, this song isn't great because, and then gave a reason, then that's better because
Oh,
at least
sure,
then you
yeah,
can go next time, right? I'm going to try and do what they suggested.
absolutely.
Um, so yeah, so hopefully we should get a bit of positive affirmation uh,
Yeah, maybe
through
like I said,
me or
if one
others.
person other than myself likes it, I've accomplished something. So
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. That's great. Yeah.
you're
Hopefully,
more than
as this
welcome.
channel grows, and if you did want to post more to me in the future, you'd get more affirmation then as well
Sure,
as
yeah.
things grow.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite song from the album?
Oh gosh,
And
man,
why?
it would change because I don't know about you or others, who are writing music, but I've heard these songs so many times as
Yeah.
I'm writing them, recording them. I'm producing them, mixing it. I'm doing everything but the final mixes and the pieces that I'm contracting out. So, I mean, it's 100 times each, at least probably for some of these songs. Going down the road, listening to them, thinking, okay, oh man, I don't like the way I did that, so I'd come home and listen to it two or three more times.
Yeah.
So it would kind of depend because I'd like a song and I'd listen to it 100 times. I'm like, beat up tired of this one.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Favorite one, man. If I had to pick a favorite, probably be the one that kind of started it because that was the one that actually had purpose.
Yeah.
I had a reason for doing that. The others, it's like, okay, well, try to just say some things that are kind of on my mind. Some things that try. It was mostly upbeat is sort of my goal. I didn't
Yeah.
want some down depressing type song, record, nothing like that.
Yeah.
So hopefully I at least accomplished that a little bit.
Cool. Yeah. I like the idea that the one that kickstarted it was your favorite because um I think there's a little bit of nostalgia there or something, or a nice memory of this is what got it
Right.
all, the
Yeah.
snowball going, down the
Sure.
mountain. So yeah, brilliant. Oh, that's nice. So if you could give people a reason to listen to your music, what would you say? What makes it unique from others?
I guess unique in today's terms because it's different than what most people are doing today.
Mm,
But not unique in terms of it's not something that you've not heard before. If you're for people who enjoy the 70s and 80s, maybe bleeding into the 90s a little bit type classic rock, that's
yeah.
kind of where I think this fits in. You may disagree, but that's kind of where I see most of this fitting in.
Yeah.
Um, it's definitely different than what you hear today, and it's not knocking what you hear today. Today, and incredibly talented musicians,
Yeah.
it's just different because it's what I grew up on. That's what I really know the best.
Yeah.
If I knew the current style of music, there would have been a lot more on there. That's like that. But if you like the older stuff, but you're not hearing any new stuff that's coming out, that might be one reason to listen to it. I always wanted there's a website called Ultimate Classic Rock, and what it is, it's a website that's dedicated to these classic rock musicians, current news about classic rock musicians, like hey, Aerosmith's going out on tour, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the one thing that's been missing, that's never been out there, is like a radio station that plays current music from classic artists, because these
Yeah.
guys they're still out there, they're still writing stuff, but you never would know it unless you are just going out to keeping up with them, following them on Facebook or social media
Yeah. They still just play the hits, don't they? They just go for the classic
in the
hits really
concerts.
more than the new
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They still write the new stuff, but because it doesn't get airplay, nobody listens to it. It doesn't,
Nobody
it's a
knows it's there.
repetition that gets people liking it.
Yeah.
So they have to play
Well,
the hits when you're in
well, let's
concert.
hope there's like a revival soon. Recently, there's been like a 90s dance revival going on in popular music today. So you never know. Things seem to be like going back around.
Sure.
So if that trend continues, you never know. We could go back to like the days of like the Beatles and
Oh, yeah.
Bowie and everything else, or
Yeah.
Bowie, however you want to say it. So I have a question about have you ever performed your music? I'm assuming that's not the case for this one.
No, most everything I do is in my home office.
Yeah.
I'd show around, but there's guitars hanging all over the walls in here, and my gear's over here. The biggest audience I've had was probably three and two cats. So it'd be my wife, 2 kids, and 2 cats. All right.
Nice.
And they're just in there, probably being nice. Yeah, Chris, sounds good, and then they
Yeah.
walk out talking about what they really think. But no, I'm not. I don't have a band really to perform with, since I relied on Fiverr for, and I did have a couple friends who helped out that were local, but um, there was no real band to go out and perform unless I did it acoustic. And quite honestly, with you being the introvert I am, I'd have a hard time doing that.
I mean, that seems to be the trend today anyway. There's a lot of bedroom musicians who will make stuff at home and then they'll start touring if they get popular enough.
Sure.
So that seems to be the way. I mean, we live in a great time now where we're all able to create entire albums at home. That would
Yeah.
have been unthought of.
Oh, it's crazy.
Even in the 90s up to maybe early 2000s, that would have been quite unthought of. So it's a good time.
Absolutely. It's crazy. I mean, just for me thinking back, okay, like, I did this, whether people like it or not, that I did it. Number one, I'm not the kind of person that was really very musically inclined.
Yeah.
And then to think, okay, well, it's actually out on Spotify and all these places, earning every bit of 67 cents so far,
Yeah.
rolling in the dough. It's just crazy to think that I was able to do it with technology like it is today. And
Yeah.
and that's so super cool. And it's just going to mean for more and more great music coming out, assuming AI doesn't ruin it. That's
Yeah.
going to be a problem now.
But yeah, I can see that becoming quite a big problem for people, like, generating their own music in a style they want instead of listening to any artist.
Yeah,
That's
and if
crazy.
nothing else, they'll get accused of it because if they're new musician coming out now putting out music at the same time AI is becoming popular, they're going to get accused of possibly having AI do their writing for them. It's
Yeah.
kind of like in the baseball era. Not sure if you follow American sports, but in the '90s, steroids were real bad.
Yeah.
So if you were, a player who hit a lot of home runs in the '90s, whether you did steroids or not, just the fact you were associated with that era, people are going to think that you did them. So,
Yeah. And then you can't win really. And that's the problem
right,
is it's becoming so good you don't know what's real and what's fake. And that's
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
a challenging time.
Right.
But it could also become quite exciting. For example, instead of sending off your work to be mixed and mastered, an AI could do it. You could
Oh
have
yeah.
an equalizer that will just equalize it to perfection. Like you
Oh yeah.
don't need to worry about your bass frequencies or
Sure.
the
Right.
high end being too tinny or anything. It will just do it. And I think
Yeah.
that would be incredible.
Oh,
But
that would be
also,
right. I mean, that would
would
have
it
saved
ruin
me
the
a couple.
fun?
That'd save me a couple $1,000s right there.
Yeah.
I did the rough mixes, and I've got tinnitus, so I don't hear very good. So, but I could tell it was really muddy. It was just really saturated sounding.
Yeah.
So being here in Nashville, there's no shortage of really good engineers out here. And I
Yeah.
found a guy who's got a studio. He did an outstanding job. I mean, he gave me a discounted rate to do it, and just did a really good job. But you're right. If AI were more readily available when I did this, it could have been something I sent off to AI, and AI somehow did most of that proper mixing and mastering for me.
Yeah.
Could have saved a little money, a little budget.
Yeah. Would it be a good thing or would it just ruin the fun? That's
Right. But
that's the
and
weird
I did
thing.
enjoy that. Get and go and work with them and learn a lot. This guy used to
Yeah.
work. His mentors. I can't remember the guy's name. He's some big producer in L.A. back when Fleetwood Mac and Rick Springfield and those folks were out that way. He had this. I don't remember his name, but anyway, he's a really big guy. And he was the mentor for the guy that did the work for me. And
Right.
it's just really great hearing some of these stories.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah. That sounds really, really good.
Yeah.
So your album's called Music Like Before.
Right.
And it will be linked in the description in the YouTube video for anyone that wants to watch it, along with a link to the reaction. I'm looking forward to reacting to your album now. You've got me a bit hyped.
Awesome. Oh, you've not
Some
listened to it yet? Okay.
No, I mean sometimes I'm still undecided about it. Sometimes I'll listen beforehand, then do the interview, but then I feel like I've got this kind of a little bit of knowledge and bias about the music. And then
Right.
sometimes I've done it after meeting the person, and then I can kind of picture them singing, well, putting it together, singing it, writing it, everything like that. So I don't know which is better. What
But
do you
there is
think?
one song I sang. One song that was really close to me. I mean, of course, the first one was too, but I didn't have the right voice. But there was one song towards the end. It's kind of a spiritual song, not Christian per se, but it's spiritual.
Yeah,
Kind of like my vision of what heaven's going to be like when I first get there. And I just have these memories when I was this kid. These big family reunions, everybody sitting around the picnic tables and stuff like that. And that's kind of what that song is about. And I thought, man, this is so personal. I can't sing, but I'm going to try singing it. So
I'm gonna have to have a listen out for it then and get to hear the
hey,
real
yeah,
you singing then. That sounds good.
yeah, yeah. it's not horrifying, but I've got like one octave. I got one range. And that's it.
I think I'm the same, you know. I rely on a bit of auto tuning as well.
Yeah, yeah, I would have
Lovely.
really had on this one.
Yeah. Well, it was lovely to meet you, Chris. So I hope take care and I hope you enjoy my reaction when I do it as well.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate everything you've done.
Lovely. It was nice to meet
Nice to
you.
meet you. Yeah, nice
Take
to meet you.
care.
Take care.
Bye.
Oh, I say.